Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome to the Woo Curious podcast. Your map to the mystical, your key to the sacred, and your guide back home to yourself. I'm Eileen, a writer, a spiritual coach, energy healer, and slow living witch. This podcast is your invitation to explore a world where the mundane and the sacred intertwine. It's a haven for those ready to take the first steps into the realms of magic and mystery, providing a safe space for you to embark on your own enchanted journey towards healing and self-discovery. Here, I'll unveil the whispers of the mystical, the rituals often hidden in plain sight, and I'll engage in sacred conversation intended to stir your soul and lead you back into your power. I'm all about demystifying woo and witchcraft. So, whether you're a seasoned seeker or simply woo curious, I'm so delighted you've decided to join me on this journey. Let's make magic. Hey Woo Crew, before we drop into today's episode, I wanted to hop on here with a couple of housekeeping items and a bit of a trigger warning. So I'll start with that. At about the 14-minute mark, my guest today mentions her experience of suicidal thoughts. And so if suicide is something that would be triggering for you, please take care of yourself. Perhaps this is an episode to skip. Perhaps you just fast forward from 13 to 15 minutes because it is a really short little moment, but I did want to make sure that you were aware so it doesn't come out of left field for you. I also want to express my gratitude for those of you who are walking the Wise Wild Woman way with me. We had a beautiful opening ceremony to welcome Imbolc and this new chapter of my offerings. In addition, if you've been waiting with bated breath for the next round of Unleash Your Inner Witch, we will be offering this again. I will be offering this course again beginning in March. So head on over to my website, get yourself on the wait list. It is not live to sign up just yet, but you'll want to get on that wait list so that you'll be the first to know when you can hop in and get all the bonuses that I always offer to those folks who said yes to being on that wait list. Hello, and welcome back, Woo Crew, to another episode of the Woo Curious podcast. I am your host, Eileen, and I'm joined today by Rose Hope, otherwise known as DeeAnne Riendeau. Rose Hope is a thought leader in spiritual and business development on a mission to elevate how others think and live. She is known as the modern-day Willy Wonka for giving away her six-figure company, Your Holistic Earth, notably the first holistic healthcare system of its kind, and I'm so curious to learn more about it. Experiencing a life of chronic illness and a couple of near-death experiences, DeeAnne rebounded with 20 years of health education and a diverse healthcare career. She's founded and launched 6 health businesses, including Rose Hope International in 2019 and the Divine Collective in 2021. Rose Hope International was created to help individuals seek more freedom, joy, and love, and deeper meaning in life. And the Divine Collective is a branch of Rose Hope International, composed of a team of healers, teachers, and intuitives who aim to raise the vibration of humanity and shine their light on this world. Each member of the collective brings their unique abilities and sacred gifts to support others in their journey here on Earth. Welcome. Oh,
I'm so happy to be here with you. Thank you so much for having me.
You are so welcome. I'm delighted to have you here. And actually, would you prefer I call you DeeAnne or Rose?
Rose is fine. Yeah, Rose is like,
okay.
She's my higher self. She's my, the better part of me.
Okay.
And so let's invite her to come through for today.
Sounds good. Well, we are here with Rose then. And Rose, as I mentioned before we hopped in to record, I really love to start all of these conversations with a little bit of insight or, exploration around your own spiritual journey. Because for myself, I was an atheist until a few years back. My listeners will be well aware of that story of mine. There were inklings, but it very much was not a spiritual life that I led. And so I'm always curious what what others' journeys have been. And I know this is a big part of your story.
It's a big part of my story. So I'm going to go way, way back to when I was 5 years old. And I had my first near-death experience. So I was eating one of those round Jawbreaker candies. Do you remember those? And
oh, yeah.
My dad said, go sit down before you choke. And I went to go sit down and I took a breath and I choked. So my dad came running over, he wrapped his arms around me, started doing the Heimlich maneuver. I remember in my 5-year-old mind thinking my head was going to pop off. Like, that's how intense it was for me. But I went limp in his arms because that object would not move. And so I had my first out-of-body experience floating above my body, watching my dad panic below. My mom was running for the phone. My sister was peeking around the corner to see what was happening. But I didn't feel the chaos below. Eileen, I felt so much peace. I felt divinity. I felt like I was held in pure love. That's what I remembered from that experience. And so I watched everything below, almost detached from it in a way. And I don't remember anything else in that out-of-body experience other than that. And before I knew it, I opened my eyes with my parents standing over me with wide eyes, right? And so after that experience, a few things happened. Mom noticed that I started to have really lucid dreams. So I would wake up and but I wouldn't be awake. I would have sleep paralysis. My dreams became very vivid, actually very nightmarish. So they were very traumatic. But I also became precognitive. So I started to become psychic. So I would know things before they would happen. And I would go to my mom and I'd say, hey, Mom, so-and-so died. And she would look at me like, how do you know that? Like, you shouldn't know this. And sure enough, the phone would ring and that person would have died. So these types of things started to happen in my life. And because I was raised in a loving Catholic home, that stuff was a little out of the box, right? It was very taboo. And so I don't think my mom really knew what to do with me. I mean, she taught me prayer and she loved me through it, but I could tell that there was some discomfort. So what did I do? I held it back. I stuffed it away, right? As many of us have done. You know, we've had an experience and we feel like, oh, that's not safe for me to share. So I stuffed it away. And instead what I did is I became an overachiever people pleaser, because I thought, well, if God gave me a second chance at life, then surely I better prove it to God that I am doing the right thing, right? So, I mean, by grade 4, I was the president of the Kids for Saving Earth Club. Like, that's how much pressure I felt that I had been chosen to come back, that I had to save the world. Like, I had such a burden on my shoulders. So fast forward now into young adulthood, I became an EMT and firefighter because I wanted to save lives like my dad saved mine. And so I started doing this work. And what would happen is spirits would come home with me. And I thought I was losing my freaking mind. I thought I must have PTSD. I'm going to have to leave this career. I can't stay in this, because I could feel the energy of a lot of the deceased patients that I had. And it was very overwhelming. So I ended up leaving that career and I went into teaching in health sciences instead. So I stayed in healthcare, but went into the teaching world. And I loved teaching. I still love teaching. It is my passion and part of my purpose here. And that was good for a while, but I was still really struggling in life. I kept wanting to be successful and do all these things. Again, still that people pleaser overachiever, but I was still feeling a bit of a disconnect. So what did Spirit do? It gave me another near-death experience so I could figure this out, And so my second near-death happened when I was 26 years old. I was actually recovering from knee surgery. So I had a full reconstructive knee surgery from a skiing injury. And unlike many others who actually have near-death experiences while they're in the operating room, I was already at home. I made it through the surgery, no problem. We figured there was like some sort of idiosyncrasy or response to some of the medication I was on that caused what happened to me. But regardless, I'm on crutches and I'm moving from the kitchen to my bed in the living room. And all of a sudden, everything starts to go black. Like a fainting spell, you would liken it to. But when I went unconscious, something so incredible happened to me. I was floating in what I would consider heaven. It was a time and space that was so full of pure, unconditional love, even more so than what I remember from when I was 5. This time, I am feeling it through every cell. And even as I talk about it, I can feel my body already tingling.
Yeah, I can see your body responding.
Every cell was like ignited, and I felt such joy and actually euphoria. I felt euphoria, and so then all of a sudden, I started to see these beautiful energies of light coming in around me, these giant orbs of light, and they were colors beyond what colors we can comprehend here. I remember being so awestruck by the colors and the vibrancy of the colors, and they were all different. And so they started to come towards me, and I had a knowing that they were angels. I didn't even have to question it. I knew. It was like a knowing. And so as I'm sitting in this space, I'm saying in my mind, I'm staying here. This is freaking amazing. Like, this is so beautiful and wonderful, and I just want to stay here. And as I express that in my mind, I hear them respond also in my mind. And they said, sorry, no, you've got work to do. And so I had this beautiful experience, and then I woke up. And when I woke up, my brother-in-law, who was helping me as I was recovering, he lived with me at the time. He was over top of me, like, again, wide-eyed, looking at me as I woke up. And as I come back to, there's part of me that just wants to go back to where I just was. And the other part of me is like, did that just happen? Am I going crazy? Again, you have to remember, I came from a very science background, and it was very logical, right? So, I questioned a lot of the intuitive stuff. I questioned a lot of the spiritual stuff because it wasn't based on the science that I had been taught. And so I questioned myself. And so I didn't say anything at first about what happened to me because I didn't even know how to articulate it because it was just so moving and so profound to me. And so in the next couple days, I really felt this push. Like, even though my ego mind was saying, you can't tell anyone, they're going to think you're bonkers, I had this really big pull that I needed to speak it and express it. So a girlfriend came over a few days after the incident, and I feel safe with her. So I'm sitting there and I'm telling her the story of this angelic experience and how profound it was. And the most magical thing happened. My brother-in-law was eavesdropping, the one that had been with me when I had the incident. And he overheard, and he came running into the kitchen. He slammed his hand on the counter and he said, I knew it. I felt the angels too.
Oh my gosh, I had chills.
Yes, every time I get the chills because it was such a gift, because I feel even emotional about it because it was such a gift. Validation. And
like,
so,
I'm not gaslighting myself.
Right? It was. And so he explained that what happened is, as I was moving on the crutches, he says all of a sudden my face just went white. Like, he said I was gone. And then I fainted, but he caught me, thankfully. And he guided me to the floor, and then he couldn't find a pulse. He couldn't see my breath. So he started to panic because he thought, oh my God, she's dead. Like, she just died. He's running to go find the phone now. And he can't find the phone because, phones end up in all sorts of places, right?
Right, of course.
And
they're not tied to the wall anymore.
Right, exactly, right? And so he's looking for the phone in panic. And he said, as he's panicking, he said he felt what he can only describe as angels coming to him. He couldn't see them like I saw the visual of them, but he felt them. And they said, just wait, she's going to be fine. Oh. And so he heard it so clearly. He came back to me then, left the hunt on the phone, came back to me. And he said my name, shook me a little bit. And he said, I came to with a smile on my face.
Wow.
So that was such a potent moment for me. And I knew then, I'm like, okay, I've got to do something about this. So I started to lean into it a little bit. I started to, read some books and just kind of dip my toe in. Mm-hmm. And, a lot of people say, after the second near death, then you figured life out. It took me a while. Okay. Let me tell you a little story. So I have the second near death. Angels sang basically, but I was still very caught up in this like ego-based, three-dimensional, what success looked like, what happiness looked like. So I was still eager to get all of those things. And I thought that joy, I thought that heaven was found out there somewhere. I played the I'll be happy when game. Do you know that game? I'll be happy when when I have my children and meet the love of my life. I'll be happy when my career. I'll be happy when I make millions. Like whatever that is for you. And I played the game. And I thought that to get to that heavenly space, I needed something outside of myself. Most of us are hunting extrinsically outside of ourselves for the things that we desire, but they are not there. Or they're there very temporarily, right?
Right. It's like a brief hit of like, ooh, that feels good, but what's the next thing?
That's right. And so I was missing that. And so I actually became more miserable than ever. In fact, I started to fall into a deep depression because I just wanted to go back to heaven and I couldn't find it. And I was failing in my hunt and my search to find heaven because I was looking in every possible place except for where it was, which was inside of me. So I came to a precipice about 5 years after the near death. My second child, a boy, I was 6 months after having him. So I was also in postpartum, but I didn't know it. So I was in a very, very deep and dark place. I felt like a failure. I felt like, how could I not be happy when I have the house and the kids and the money and the life that everyone dreams of? And I was mad at myself, for not being able to be happy. So I was in a really bad place. So bad, in fact, I decided I was going to take my life. So, as I'm laying in bed one night, I'm deciding how I'm going to do this. And I was in just so much emotional pain. I just felt everyone would be better off if I wasn't there. And I was so deeply wanting to go back to heaven. I just wanted to go back to that space. And so I prayed because my mom had taught me how powerful prayer was as a kid, thank goodness. And I prayed and I said, okay, God, this is the only path I see. If there's another path, you better show it to me. I was demanding. I was saying, okay, show me some mercy here. Like there's got to be something. And so I was guided by a vision, and I do believe it was an angelic vision. I felt an angel's presence come to me and show me this entire holistic healthcare system that I was to create. Now, I had a healthcare background. I had illnesses through my whole life. So it was like ding, ding, ding. The directional signposts were all there for me to do something like this. And I felt like for all those people that were sick and tired of being sick and tired, like this would bridge the gap between the public and the provider. So I had this whole vision get downloaded in a matter of minutes. It was so compelling. I got up the next morning and I started this company. It saved my life. It saved my life. So as I leaned into creating this holistic healthcare company, I started to meet these spiritual gurus and people who did the Akashic records and all of these interesting things. And I'm like, I don't know if you can really do that. And because I needed to research all this stuff before I started promoting it, of course, I started to take classes. And my first class was an Akashic records class. And I got to tell you, it was like a magic door had opened up into everything that I had forgotten about who I was. All of my intuitive gifts that I stuffed away as a child all came flooding back to me. And it was so potent and profound. I just knew there was no turning back. And so from a skeptic, I was converted to a full believer. And so that's what really was a catalyst for me. So then as I'm building this company, I've worked on this company for 7 years, put hundreds of thousands of hours and dollars into the company. I get to another fork in the road and I'm being called to do the spiritual work. I'm being called to do readings. I didn't think I was going to be so good at them. And all of a sudden people are like, oh my God, you need to do these readings and sessions. And, and this pull to spiritual teaching was calling me, but I couldn't do both. I had to kind of choose. And so I was guided to give away the holistic company because it had given me life. I couldn't sell it. It didn't make sense to me to do that. I knew I had to gift it. And people thought I was nuts. They thought I had people calling me and offering me money for it so that I wouldn't give it away. And so I did this contest. People had to write essays and they had to do different activities. And I ran this contest. And even though I had a draw to one person in particular, there was others that had such profound gifts too. I couldn't quite decide. And eventually I had to make a decision, and I chose someone to take over that company, which is changed remarkably since I ran it. But nonetheless, I knew that that was the best thing that I could do. And it was actually such a gift for me in giving that away. And so then I was able to practice full time in the spiritual world. And so I became a reverend in metaphysics. So I have a degree in metaphysics, working on my master's and my doctorate in metaphysics, and deepening my spiritual pathway. And so that's been my focus now. And it has been such a gift. So there's the backstory. That's how I've gotten here. I know that was a bit long-winded, but I felt like it was so important to share that.
Yeah, there's so many little pieces of your story that just resonate or make me curious to learn more, or feel worth drawing attention back to. That sense of not feeling able to trust what you've experienced, I think is a really common one, because this is the Woo Curious podcast, and because of how recently I've opened up to more woo or eccentric, or all of this kind of side of life, the spiritual side of life, the energetic side of life. I always like to remind myself and listeners that it's normal to feel like you're crazy if you are having these experiences, or if you're curious, because that's what this overculture, the society that we live in, has told us about.
Absolutely.
All of these ways of knowing.
Yes.
So can you speak a little bit to, what you would say to folks who aren't sure how to lean into that trust, or who are scared about either opening themselves to this or about sharing with loved ones their experiences?
Yes. Oh, there's so much I want to say here. Let's see if I can make it succinct for all of you. I think the first thing that's really important is that, yes, indeed, we have been conditioned. And I love to use the power of no wonder. So no wonder you're scared. No wonder it feels uncomfortable. No wonder you want to hide away. No wonder it doesn't feel safe to be seen and heard. Because not only has that happened in this lifetime where we've been conditioned, where maybe we've been told that it's better that we be quiet or keep our mouth shut, right? But maybe it's even from a past lifetime as well. So most people who have divine gifts of the magnitude in which they're being invited to come into, be a light worker or a healer in some way, have had historical soul lifetimes where they've been persecuted, condemned, killed, exiled for doing the work of their truth. So that plays in the back. That plays subconsciously even. And then what happens is we have our ego mind, EGO, our earth-generated operating system. Our ego is there to keep us safe. But over thousands of years, that ego has become the leader in our brains. It actually makes most of the decisions. People say they have the power of free will, not if the ego is running the show. And so most of us are actually letting the ego run the show. I let it run my life, my whole life. And that's why I was so miserable. And again, the ego has value. Back in the cave people days, it said run from the predators, right? But now it comes in with everything we're doing. It's making everything a threat, right? Our job is to befriend the ego. This is one of the first things I teach people, is to befriend the ego. Because if you can do that, if you can get that ego to know where the boundaries are, it won't be hijacking your true divinity. And you will be able to better discern or decide for yourself, is this coming from my divine intuition, or is this coming from my ego? So that you can make better decisions and you can lean into what is true for you and resonant for you. So that ego gets in the way of a lot of that discernment. But if you can befriend it, it makes a big difference. So one of the tools that I have for everybody, give your ego a name. Become the witness. Become the witness of your own self. You are a multidimensional being. There's more than one aspect to you, and you can be the observer. You can be the witness, and you can talk to different aspects of yourself. And so one of my clients, she calls hers Ivana Gripe a lot. I think that's hilarious. I mean, you can call your ego mind whatever you want. Mine, I've called her name is Jane. And my higher self, her name is Rose. So I have Jane and I have Rose, and we have these conversations back and forth all the time. And they help me to be able to know what is resonant with my truth, you know? And so it gives me an opportunity to start strengthening that trust muscle. And it does take time, especially when we've been told, we're wrong, whatever. The other thing I want to share is this. Your intuition is always right. It's your perception of the outcome that isn't. So when people have said, when they say, oh no, my intuition led me into this situation or to this person, and then it didn't go so well, my intuition was wrong. But no, your intuition knows exactly what your spirit needs. It knows exactly what lessons you need. And so the intuition brings us into not always rainbows and butterflies, you guys. And I think that's a misconception where people think intuition just leads them to this easy path. Intuition leads us to the path in which we get to evolve to our highest potential. That's what it does for us. So that's a little side note. Back in terms of the people that are feeling scared or feeling nervous for stepping in. So the ego is the one thing, recognizing and using the power of no wonder I'm scared. There's all this stuff. In addition to that, we can look at doing some clearing work. So we can clear away the energetics that are maybe holding people back as well. But the idea here is to look at this from childlike curiosity, to invoke a sense of awe and wonder. It doesn't mean you have to buy into the thing, but you can lean in with a sense of awe and wonder. I wonder what this is going to look like. I wonder if I look at this from a different angle, what I might be able to see. And then I can take that information and I can sit with it and then eventually decide for myself or not. I can just sit with it too. But it gives us that opportunity, like you said, to at least be curious, to lean in just a little bit.
It's making me think that piece, the awe and wonder, which I've done a few episodes centered around those topics before, but it's the suspension of disbelief as a first step often, which is, as you speak to that childlike curiosity, what we do when we make believe as children and what we do when we read fiction, which you have written.
Oh, yes, I have. Oh my gosh. So thanks for circling to this book, this beautiful book, The Ark. So this has been a 20-year project. I started writing when I was going through my quarter life crisis in my 20s, but I didn't know what I was writing at the time. I just started writing some of my stories. And as I was writing, I was writing it almost as like my autobiography, like I wanted to write it about myself and my experience. And then as I was writing it, it was like God came in, creator came in, whatever you call that, source energy. And I could feel this like, this is the story for the world. It's not your story anymore. And so I started to see that there was this character that I was speaking about, and I was speaking to all of those people that were afraid, that had hidden their truth and who they were. So it follows the timeline of a young girl who goes through similar experience to mine, a couple of near-death experiences, right? So it's still based on my real life, but through the lens of this beautiful character. And she ends up going to the heavenly realm and spends time in the angel kingdom. And she gets to meet the angels and understand the angels, and they teach her things. So it is a book that has some very beautiful spiritual lessons in it as it tells the story. And it is the first of a trilogy, so there's going to be others.
Ooh. That's exciting.
Yes. So this book has been channeled. It was a channeled book. It came from Divine, and I'm just letting that be led for the other two books as well. So yes, it's available on Amazon if anybody feels curious about that too.
Wonderful. Yeah. And of course we will link in the show notes there. It sounds like it's such a beautiful way to approach some of the teachings and the messages that you have for people around bringing that kind of spirituality or the metaphysical into the mundane, into the day-to-day life, opening up to that kind of possibility and helping folks perhaps process some of their own experiences of the spiritual, of the metaphysical, of the unexplainable.
Yes. And as you're saying that, I feel compelled to share this too. And it does relate to your early question about, why we're scared to share some of these stories. Storytelling is medicine, and it does require us to be vulnerable, but it's medicine for us as we speak it, and it's medicine for the world as we express it, as they receive it. And so I love to remind people of that, because what we do when we share our vulnerable stories is we give permission for others to be seen and heard. That is such a gift, because most of us are afraid to be seen and heard for various reasons, conditionings, and what have you, right? And so it does take some courage, for sure. I mean, I went from a very science background, professional. I remember when I first started doing this work, and I had messages from people saying, oh, you can't do this. You're going to lose people. They're going to think you're crazy. And I'm so glad I persevered, because the world, it's opened up for me, and the people that have come to me after getting off stages, they come and they say, oh my God, I've never told anyone this, but this happened to me, and I feel like I can finally share it now. So it's a gift that keeps on giving. And I feel like that's so important for us in this day and age, for us to express these experiences. And that's what's going to help us to also lean into deeper truth within ourselves and help us with that discernment piece. Because as we're allowing ourselves to be fully authentic, to be the truest version of ourselves, we increase the vibration of all of consciousness. And in fact, there's studies now that show that authenticity vibrates higher than love. Because when we truly love ourselves, we are able to then be our true authentic self. So I think it's a beautiful gift in being able to share these powerful stories.
Yeah, it is. And I think it's truly an example of the way in which, when we are able to step into our authenticity and share, even though it feels scary and vulnerable, for the most part, what happens is that we then receive so many more blessings, so many more connections, so much more love ourselves, because we've opened this door. And when you're in that space, having those connections and feeling like you are really aligned, the people who naysay, the people who are like, you're crazy, or what do you think you're doing, they're the ones that compassion that we've cultivated for ourselves first and then for others, it goes out to them in this way that it doesn't feel hurtful for us. There's this sense, at least for me, when I hear that kind of negative backlash of, how are you hurting? How can I help you?
Yes.
Yeah.
My mom told me many years ago, she says, the love that you give, the energy that you express, the light that you shine, is not diminished by someone else's inability to receive it. In other words, there's people that are there's people that are just where they're at, and we can meet them where they're at in a way of being able to say, okay, that's okay that you feel that way. It's not personal, right?
Yeah.
And so we can still extend love to them, even if they don't agree, even if they have judgments upon us.
Yeah.
I want to circle back to that too, because you talked about the courage it takes, but how much it opens a door to our truth and to so much more abundance in our lives. And that's absolutely true. I call that filling the soul bank, by the way. There's lots of ways we can fill the soul bank, but that's one of the ways, is true expression of who we are. But it does take a great amount of courage. And I want to share a little story, because I find analogies so helpful for me in my mind. I'm a very visual person. And this story was very potent for me. And some of you might have heard it already, but I think it bears repeating. It's a story about the cows and the bison. And so the cows and the bison are out in the field. And in the distance, they can see a storm that's coming. It's making its way over to the field. And the cows look at that storm and they say, forget it. I'm just going to run from that storm, like, get me out of here. And so the cows start to run. But eventually that storm catches up to the cows. And now the cows are running with the storm. So they're having to stay and struggle and suffering. That was me in my 20s, playing the I'll be happy when game, running from everything inside of me, right? Now the bison, on the other hand, they look at that storm and they say, okay, you're on. And they head into that storm. And so as they do that, the storm moves much quickly through them and they're out on the other side. And so this is a great analogy, not just for expressing your truth, but for dealing with the things that scare you. And sometimes our emotions scare us. Sometimes anger scares us. Sometimes, grief scares us. And so what do? We stuff it away, or we pretend that it's not really there, right? Or we have a pity party but don't really look at it as a learning experience. And then guess what happens? A week later, a month later, a year later, it comes back again, and we're thinking, oh, why do I have to deal with this? And why is this so hard for me? And so the invitation is to lean in to that storm, to lean into that grief, to lean into that anger. Again, whatever that perceived low vibration energy is, lean in. Because those energies have value too. It's kind of like if we had a group of kids and we said, well, that kid's shorter, so it's worth less.
Right.
Right? We're always like,
Yeah.
oh, I want the love and the peace and the harmony. And yet we're so quick to reject any of those low vibration energies. But even those energies have potency and value in them. I've learned so much from grief in my life, I can't even begin to tell you. And so it's been such a teacher for me. So let those emotions be teachers instead of rejecting them and pushing them away. They too just want to be seen and heard. And when we lean in, we're facing the storm of them, and we're getting as much value as we can so that we can get through that storm faster and get to the other side. And I think we miss that a lot. I did, at least.
We do.
I stuffed away 20 years of grief, and then it hit me with pneumonia, and I was sick, and I cried for 40 days. Every day. But it was so cathartic for me. I needed to go through that experience, and I recognized, oh my gosh, there's value in everything. Because really, God, divine, divinity, it's in everything. Even the really shitty experiences, God is in there too. Our job is to receive the value in all of that, rather than self-induced suffering, which is what most of us do, right? When things are in our mind are not going the way we think that they should, there's a discrepancy. And it's a suffering one, because we're thinking, oh no, it's not the way it's supposed to be, it's not the way it's supposed to be, and we suffer in that. But the mystics practice something called continual expectancy. Have you ever heard of that, continual expectancy?
I haven't heard that term, but I think I understand
you probably know
where you're
what it is.
headed.
Yes, where I'm going with this. So continual expectancy doesn't mean that I expect a particular outcome. It means that I expect that whatever it is that does happen is exactly there for my highest good and the good of others. So it means that even if I get in a car accident, knock on wood, okay, it means that that accident needed to happen for whatever growth my spirit needed. And so then it allows me to receive the value instead of getting caught into the negativity, the victim mode, that kind of thing. And I'm not saying, like, don't let yourself have a pity party. I have pity parties too. But we get to shift our perspective so that we can receive more of the value. And then what we do is that alchemizes that energy. That low vibration energy I talked about, as soon as it's seen and heard, it already is being alchemized, so it's not as dense and heavy anymore, right?
Yeah.
So it's a beautiful opportunity for us to be in this beautiful, powerful position where we can start to alchemize energy. We can take grief and turn it into peace or grace. We can take anger and turn it into love by receiving the value from those experiences and those energies.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think a lot of the discomfort that we have individually and collectively with some of those quote unquote lower vibration energies is that we've been in a culture for centuries now that has really placed this emphasis on, like, this is good and this is bad, this is light and this is dark, this is good
dualistic.
and evil.
Yeah.
And then and this
dualistic
idea of finding some sort of purity or some sort of everlasting good, but you cannot have the good without the bad. You cannot have the love without the grief, because they are two sides of the same coin and there is value in each. And to feel love fully, we have to be able to feel grief fully. It's one of the things that so many of my clients are like, I don't want to have to feel that to feel this.
I get it.
And yet, and yet, yeah.
Yes, you've got it. You know, that's part of the three-dimensional world that we live in, you know, and everything really does belong here. Everything belongs here. Even if we can't understand it, we think, how do the wars belong here? You know, it's like, again, there's value in everything, even though if we can't see the whole picture. You know, a lot of people, we take these little pieces of the puzzle and then we make a decision. We decide whether it's good or bad, right? But we don't have the whole picture. Our job is to trust that divine creator is taking care of us. Our job is to deepen that relationship within ourselves. You know, there's a fun little story about God and his, I'll call it his council, okay? So he's meeting with his council and he's saying, I'm really sick of these humans. They're really getting on my nerves. Where can I go and hide? And one council member says, God, go to the top of the highest mountain. They'll never find you there. And another council member pops in and says, no, they'll find you there. Go to the deepest depths of the ocean. They'll never find you there. And another council shows up and says, go into the heart of man. They will surely never look there. And that was my story. I was looking outside of myself and not building this beautiful relationship within myself, the God consciousness within me. I am an extension of source, as you are, as we all are. We are all, you know, divine creations from God. And so understanding that we have God within us allows us to deepen this relationship. This is how we create heaven on earth. We've got to find it within ourselves. We have been given, it's innately given, happiness, joy, all the things that we desire, already given to us. The problem for most of us is that we've been inundated and clouded with all that conditioning and all those naysayers and all of that stuff. And so it's clouded us, and so we can't access it. And then we keep seeking out here and seeking out here. I'll be happy when I have the good job and blah, blah, blah. So this is an invitation, a call for us to start building these relationships within ourselves. And so when I talk about my higher self being Rose, that's my God self. That's my divine mind. And so I talk to her. I talk to her essence. She gives me information. When I wake up in the morning, my process is this. I wake up, especially on the days when I really feel like I don't want to get out of bed, where I'm like, oh my God, I have so much to do, you know, those days. I say, good morning, God. I know that you're waking up with me. Thank you. And I know that you're going to do everything that needs to be done today. You see, divine is our doer and divine is our supplier. And most of us have cut off that channel. And so this is why people are suffering and struggling and feeling like they're so alone and in despair, because we've blocked our ability to receive from divine all that is within us. And so that's my biggest invitation for everyone is when you're not sure which direction to go, the answer is inward, always. And that has been the most beautiful lesson for me in my life. I have a beautiful, loving relationship with my inner self. And that is a gift that keeps on giving. And so from there, I get to tune into heaven. And as I tune into heaven within myself, guess what? Heavenly things happen outside of me. Because everything will be reflected back to you. Everything happening inside of you will be reflected back. Right? If there's chaos inside of you, chaos is going to show up outside. Right? And so that is truly where all the answers are for us. And I know that a lot of people are like, well, that's great. All the answers are on the inside, but like, what's that process? And it really is starting to have conversations within thyself. It's that simple. It's actually that simple. We are so good at overcomplicating things, but it's that simple. We really are. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And just before we wrap up here too, I want to highlight, because everything you're saying is really resonating. And I think often it used to be that when I'd hear folks talk this way, that I'd feel a little bit like, okay, that's great for you, but I'm in the midst of suffering, or I'm in, you know, experiencing whatever hardships. And there is a tendency in the spiritual world to bypass some of that, or almost like inflict blame. The fact that you reflect back, or what is inside will be reflected back, is not to lay blame on an individual.
Absolutely.
If there are hardships or horrible things happening, it's not your fault.
Yes.
And how we choose to respond and be with what is happening, that's what's under our control there. That's the piece that we have the ability to modify.
That's that power of free will. And I'm glad that you said that, because, you know, this is not about blame and shame in any way. And in fact, it's important to not go there, but to use that power of no wonder to say, no wonder I feel so hurt. No wonder I feel so upset. I've had all these experiences and now I'm experiencing this thing and it's triggered something within me. No wonder. Like, give yourself deep grace in this, but recognize the power that you hold. That's the key. We have so much power here and we have given it all away.
Yeah.
You know, we all share something in common. We all have to experience pain in this world. It's inevitable. Every human being will go through pain. However, suffering is a choice. And so we might feel some pain, and how I perceive that pain and how I respond to that pain is up to me. So if I'm willing to leverage that pain and say, oh my God, that pain, whether it's emotional or physical pain, what is this showing me? What is this telling me? You know, I stub my toe quite a bit because I'm always running around the house, taking care of kids, running a business. And as I stub my toe, I think, oh, ow, ow, ow. And then I think, oh, what's the message? What do I need?
Yeah.
What am I supposed to learn here? And more often than not, it's like, be more present. Hello.
Yeah.
Usually slow down to move ahead, you know, be more present. But, you know, we're all human after all. And so it's important to hold space for ourselves when we are feeling tender, when we are feeling the suffering. Sometimes I feel like I just need to be in suffering too, believe it or not, where I just need to have a pity party. And I don't want to stop
sometimes.
Yes. And we need to do that, right? Again, in some ways we're holding space for those energies to just be there and to not judge them, to not be in a hurry, you know, but just to sit with them and lean into them, you know, much like the bison in the storm too. So it's another way that we can hold space rather than stuffing it away or trying to move past it and causing that spiritual hijacking or spiritual bypassing, as you referenced there.
Yeah.
So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, my pleasure. And thank you for sharing so much wisdom with us today. I definitely encourage folks to go out and get a copy of your book, The Arc. The link will be below as always. And for anybody wanting to connect further with you, perhaps to work with you, how do people get in touch with you?
Well, I have a gift.
All the above.
I have a gift. I love giving. I know that my ability to give is matched with my ability to receive. And so I love giving. And so there is a little soul blueprint quiz. So the listeners, if they're curious about some of their soul blueprint and what that means for them and how they show up in the world, it's a fun little quiz. And at the end, you get to book with one of my team for a free session, or myself. Some of you will be matched up with me, and others will be matched up with someone on my team. And so you get a free Akashic reading and session with somebody. So that is a gift for anyone who feels curious. And of course, my website and my podcast information will be in the show notes for everyone as well.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Rose. It's been a pleasure to chat.
It has been such a joy to be with you. Thank you for shining your light on the world and expressing your stories, helping us to be seen and heard. I so appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. And Woo Crew, thank you so much for tuning in and listening. As always, if you enjoyed this episode, please leave a rating or review, share it with your friends. It helps ever so much to get the show discovered by new listening ears. And as always, I will be back with you here this time next week. Bye for now.
Bye.